I now call this meeting to order for the Jacksonville City Council, this joint meeting with the Onslow County Commissioners.
I'd like to call the Board of Commissioners meeting to order with the joint meeting with the City Council.
We have, before I get to the agenda, I want to recognize Earl Taylor from our Board of Education sitting out there in the audience. Council, we have a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt that agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the agenda for the Onslow County Board of Commissioners.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
We have several presentations that are scheduled for this evening. The first one being on a tax base update with her taking into consideration Hurricane Florence and also the FY 21 tax projections. And I believe Harry Smith is going to present this item. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We have just a few slides to look at to take a look at the or to talk a little bit about the damage that was incurred during Hurricane Florence last year. Obviously, Hurricane Florence did a tremendous amount of damage across our county. Initially, our damage assessment teams, consisting of our appraisal staff for the county and also our municipal partners, went out and tagged over 11,000 properties with an estimated total value of loss of $515 million. Obviously, that could have been a very huge impact to the tax base. And from the tax office, we have to try to determine how much of that damage was still unrepaired as of January 1st of 2019, which is our assessment date. In an effort to get the best information we could, we actually mailed questionnaires out to all our real estate property owners and asked them to submit that back to our office to identify what damage they had that was going to be unrepaired as of January 1st. And as you can see on the slide, we had over 4,800 responses to that questionnaire. The impacts are shown on the screen there. Basically, Jacksonville had nearly 900 parcels that were still unrepaired with a total value loss of $29 million. On the county level, there was over 4,800 properties with a value of $118 million. In order to calculate how much of that was a direct loss of tax revenue to the municipalities and to the county this year, I took those numbers and multiplied them by the respective tax rates. And as you can see on the chart, that resulted in a revenue loss of over $186,000 for the county or for the city of Jacksonville and $835,000 for the county. Total for all the jurisdictions was calculated to be $1.1 million. I would like to point out that even though this was revenue loss directly attributable to reported storm damage, we did have some growth in the tax base last year, which mitigated the total impact somewhat. So even though we had some growth, this is how much was actually damaged number. So when we turned in the budget estimates for this year, we did reduce this numbers by the growth that had incurred within the county and each jurisdiction. So it wasn't totally that much revenue lost just from one budget year to the next. The next thing I wanted to share with you was how it impacted tax collections. Obviously, with a number of homes damaged coming out of the storm, we were concerned that citizens would not be able to pay their taxes. But when we look at our collection percentage for the most recent fiscal year, 18-19, compared to the prior year, which ended in 18, we actually showed an increase in all jurisdictions, including the county, with the exception of Richland's. That's probably mostly attributable to a couple of years ago, we took a more aggressive stance regarding delinquent collections, and the collection percentage increase had actually jumped a good bit the previous year, and it continued to increase this year, even though a number of those properties were still damaged. Regarding what we can expect in the future, talking with our appraisal staff, they've been out busy visiting properties all year, not only doing storm damage reviews, but also new construction. And they estimate that probably at least 75% of the properties that they are seeing out there will have already been repaired or will be repaired prior to the next January 1st. In our system, we still have around 3,200 properties flagged that still need to be reviewed between now and January 1st. Obviously, that's the date that we have to base the assessments on, so we're expecting all that to be wrapped up. Kevin has reported that the number of permits issued this year is drastically more than it was last year, so we expect some additional growth due to new construction, things going on. So I can pretty much confidently say there will be a plus number regarding the assessed value going into next year's budget. We just don't know exactly how much it'll be at this point. The other good news is looking at our sales data, we're noticing that sales prices are tending to be higher than the current assessed values, which if that trend continues means that we should see a revenue or a valuation increase during the next reappraisal, which is scheduled for 2022. And that's basically the information I have prepared. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer those for you.
Mr. Thomas.
Harry?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. I was one of those that had impact, and I was really appreciate the way it was handled. The guy came in and he asked my insurance adjustment. I sent it to him, and he used that to compute the current value. I guess my question is, we have repaired our home. How do we get that message across? Are you going to inquire to us, or do we just let you know it's back to where it was, or what's the process?
If taxpayers, some taxpayers have let us know it's back, and if we'll take that information and go ahead and put the value back up for the next tax year. We have these properties flagged to follow up with the taxpayers. If we do not hear from them, we will be following up with them to make sure that we have the information before January 1st.
So we can just give you a call and let you know.
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Harry, what's the trend of the tax, sales tax, not sales tax, but property tax this year? Is it coming in? I know the bills were sent out and people started to pay. And how's that trend looking as far as collection for this year?
Through 2 months is pretty even for this time of year. It's really hard to get a trend established until the December collections come in, because a lot of folks end up coming in and paying around the end of December or the first week of January. But so far, it's pretty even with what we saw last year at the same time period.
Any other questions or comments?
The general comment, I hear you're always very good to work with Gail and our staff. We appreciate the cooperation that you give. And obviously, those are very good notices as David and I look at the easy task of next year's budget. Now, David told me it was going to be easy budget for him, and I'm not sure about for us. But those look very encouraging considered what we were looking at this time last year.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a report concerning the Dix Crisis Center update. And before Sherry gets started, I'd like to give a little bit of history about the mental health in Onslow County. In 2000, 2004, I was on the board, and at that time, Onslow County had their own self-contained mental health operation, and we handled all the mental health and the detox center and everything within the confines of the county. As a result of some legislative action, in the latter part of 2004, 2005, the state said that you got to have a local management entity, and you got to have a certain population in that entity, and you're going to have to consolidate with another county in order to get the population numbers. So at that time, we looked for counties that we could include that had the population numbers, and ended up being Carteret County was the other county that met our criteria as far as population. We created two separate boards, one from Onslow County and one from Carteret County, and we merged and we made decisions based on the two counties. We still were running the detox center because Carteret County was bringing their folks over here, which worked out really good. Well, after that, in the 2006, 2007 area, the state come out and said, you got to have a bigger catchment area. You got to cover more lives, and you got to merge with other counties in order to get that population number. So we ended up merging with 5 counties. Those counties were New Hanover, Onslow, Carteret, Pender, and Brunswick County. That created a bigger board, and it was called, at that time, it changed the name from Onslow Carteret County Mental Health to Coastal Care. And there was an individual that was from New Hanover County that run and was the CEO of Coastal Care. And the first thing he did, because we didn't have the votes, we only were 2 counties out of the 3 we didn't have the votes, so that was how the crisis center, that as we knew it as the detox center, got closed. And we had been struggling ever since then to get it opened back up. But we were totally out of control of the detox center. We couldn't open it back up because it was in control of Coastal Care, and Coastal Care had the votes to keep it closed. So as things went along, Coastal Care and the state come down and said, you got to have a bigger catchment area. Said you got to cover more lives. So they changed the name and merged with another organization, with other organizations that were smaller like us, and it became Trillium. And now Trillium is a 26-county catchment area. And believe me, they're in the driver's seat as far as the services that's provided and the providers. We were able to convince them that the $500,000 that we were investing in mental health would be used to reopen the crisis center. And I think Commissioner Knapp was on that board at that time, and he was lobbying hard to get them convinced that we needed that crisis center back. And we had a new CEO of the Trillium, which was Lisa Wainwright and David Tart, and they seen the need here, and then they agreed to allow us to use the $500,000 to $500,000 that we were contributing every year to put it back into a crisis center and get that crisis center back open here. So that's where we're at now. But the crisis center, with the money that Senator Brown got for us to renovate it, it had to have that name Dix Crisis Center placed in it. So that's how it got named what it is now. That was part of the money that came from the Dix mental health institution that the state sold, and that's where we're at now. But it's still in the control of Trillium. Just to give you a little bit of update and a little bit of information about it. And Trillium, all they do is manage the Medicaid and indigent money for people that need crisis intervention, and they manage the Medicare reimbursements from the provider. So I'm pretty much on target, Sherry.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
But I would now I'll turn it over to Sherry to come up with details on some of the things that's happening at the crisis center. But that's where we are with, and we a small fish in a big pond is the only way I know how to tell you. A small fish in a big pond with the crisis center. So and there's other crisis centers around. New Hanover County has one, a pretty large one. I think Greenville's got one. And then we have the mobile crisis. I don't know if the mobile crisis center, is that still in place, Sherry?
The mobile crisis service is still in place, sir, yes.
I'll turn it over to you now before I stumble on something here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Mr. Mayor and our respective boards, thank you for letting me come tonight and talk to you just a little bit. We have, I'm passing out the statistics that we received recently from the Recovery Innovations, which is the provider that Trillium has contracted with to provide the crisis center. I wanted to share just a little bit of information. What you're looking at, if you get ahead of me, is the first 2 pages are the August statistics. Pages 3 and 4 are year-to-date, and year-to-date is 8 days of July and the August statistics, so they don't look a lot different yet. But I did want to remind you, the facility just opened on July 24th. And at that time, we did what we call a soft opening, which means that we really didn't make a lot of fanfare about it. We just sort of opened the doors and let the law enforcement entities in our various counties know. And they got busy really quickly and were pretty much full from just a couple of days in. But I think they opened on a Thursday, and by Monday they were full from that point. So as you're looking at this information, one of the first things you'll see is the occupancy for the month of August was 83%. 80% is the number they actually strive for. You would think it's 100, but we always want to have a bed or 2 open so that the next law enforcement officer that comes through has it available. And the way they keep it at 80 is not by not taking patients until they're full, it's by quickly turning them around to a more appropriate level of service. So if the patient comes in crisis and they can stabilize them very quickly and get them into an outpatient situation, that's great. If they need longer-term placement, they try to turn those around very quickly so that those beds are then available for the next person that comes through. So 80% is the number that you're shooting for, and that's the number that keeps the facility a little more solvent, as well as making it so that we always have beds available when we come in. Trillium's expectation when the facility first opened was that it would take up to 2 years to reach that 80% capacity. They felt like it would take us 2 years to get the community aware of the service, and for people to start using the service, and for the service to actually be used at 80%. I think we showed them very quickly that this group was correct and it would not take us 2 years, and that the need is very high in our community for this type of service. One service that is, they're still in the process of accreditation, is the involuntary commitment, which is a very necessary service for our community. The provider had to be open before they could apply for an IVC status. So they're in the process of credentialing, and they've not received any information yet that they have not turned everything in. So that's a good sign. Usually if you haven't turned stuff in, they start telling you very quickly, and they anticipate hearing something in about the next 30 days, I believe they shared with us. So just to sort of give you a few things, the first block that you see on your page talks about the occupancy and recidivism. These are things that our task force and the collective boards asked that the provider measure, so that as a group we could determine that they were spending the money wisely. So they're showing you there. Our expectation was that we would have less than 25% recidivism in a 30-day period. 6% is not an actual, it is an actual number. It's not a very valid number because we haven't had enough days yet. So it's a great number. Look for it to go up, just because of the nature of the service. First responders, which would be our law enforcement or EMS folks dropping people off, we wanted it to be in less than 15 minutes. They're averaging 3 minutes. So that's pretty good. There's not a lot I can get done in 3 minutes, I'll be honest with you. Aftercare, it was very important to our group that that not only would the facility ensure that aftercare was arranged, but we know that one of the problems is people have the best of intentions, and that doesn't always work out. So we asked the facility to also include follow-up. And a crisis center is not actually responsible for follow-up, but we put that in our expectations and they agreed to it. And so they follow up to make sure that when they release someone with an aftercare appointment, they actually make contact to see if that aftercare appointment was made. We want aftercare appointments within 72 hours. They're averaging 54 hours right now. So patients leaving the crisis center are having their first aftercare appointment within 54 hours on average. Also, the time frame for admissions, we wanted it to take no longer than an hour. They're at 2.67 minutes for an admission. I go back to my comment about the 3 minutes there, honestly. Again, the average length of stay is expected to be at 3 days. They're averaging 3.75 days right now, so they're working on that. As you look through, there's a lot of information on here. On the second page, on the right-hand side, you'll denote which counties were served, how many people, and what percentage of the total population of the crisis center that was. I will note the 3 counties involved in the partnership are Carteret, Craven, and Onslow. So you'll see Carteret had 11 patients. Craven had 10 in the month of August. If you look on the back of page 4, you'll actually see the total count. You would see 11 for Carteret, 11 for Craven, and Onslow would have 63. They've broken out the percentages of those, Onslow at 50% and each of the other 2 counties at 9%. That's, we expect the other 2 counties' percentages to go up. Their numbers are a little lower right now because we've not been taking involuntary commitments yet. So their law enforcement's not been transporting people. Once they start bringing involuntary commitment patients in, we expect their numbers to go up a bit. You will note that there are some other counties represented in small numbers here. Trillium, first of all, is part of it. There are 26 counties in the catchment area. We always knew that those counties would have access to our crisis center as well. One of the agreements made was if there is someone from one of the 3 counties and someone from another county that both need admission and there's only one bed, our folks get priority. But we had not agreed not to take anyone from other counties. And in fact, the MOU actually references other communities. And then on the left-hand side of the page, under diverted for capacity, on that same page, you'll see that there's been a total of 5 patients in the 6 weeks that were diverted because the center was at capacity when they were called. 1 came from Carteret County and 4 were from Onslow County. Of those 4, only 2 went to the emergency room. 1 chose not to access other treatment at this time, and 1 was referred to another mental health facility or outpatient service. So even though the crisis center was not able to accept that person, they were able to refer them to another service. They were not just left without service. Additionally, the Carteret County person that was not accepted was also referred to another treatment program. So those folks were still able to get some sort of treatment from that. I also want to update you on some things we didn't know the last time we talked about the crisis center. When we first, when Lisa Wainwright first came down and met with some of us, and I think Mayor Pro Tem was there and a few others, we had a conversation about what we thought the budget for the crisis center was. And they anticipated, because Trillium had never opened a crisis center in their catchment area. There was already one in existence in a couple of places, but they'd not opened one. Their best guess was that it would be right about $1.8 million to run the crisis center. And they agreed that if our communities came up with 1.3, they would fund the rest and we would get the crisis center that we felt like we needed. So we came up with just a little bit more than the 1.3, and the bids for the crisis centers came in at about 2.5 times what they projected. But Trillium stood behind their commitment and agreed to put it out, to go ahead and contract with the best bidder. And so where we thought we were contributing as a group 2/3 of the budget for the crisis center, we're actually contributing 31% of the budget. So that is a little wrinkle that, you know, you have no way of knowing until the bids actually come in what you're going to get. But I did want to make sure that everyone had the most updated information about the budget. The Oversight Committee, of which you all have representatives appointed, has met twice. The first meeting was largely a organizational meeting where they elected your Mayor Pro Tem as the chair of that committee. Also on that is Commissioner Robin Knapp. And then we have representatives from both hospitals and also from Carteret and Craven counties on that board. They have seen the same data that you're getting today and had lots of conversation about things we can do to continue to improve the service as well as the access to the center. And I think are on the right track for having some really good things come from this as we move forward. I will just caution you once again, the data that we have is for 39 days, I think, if I did the math correctly. So statistically, and hopefully my college statistician professor's not watching this and laughing as I talk about statistics, but it's not a very significant amount of time to use that data to make big decisions on, but they are really good numbers from the offset. So celebrate them and cautiously watch them for the changes that will come as we have several more months to add to it. In the original memorandum of agreement, the decision that the group made was that decisions about funding or not funding would happen annually as this committee continues to meet. So now the MOU, because it's a little behind the times, we didn't get it open quite as early as we had hoped. So the MOU will need to be revisited as we come into the end of this fiscal year. But the group's decision was that any votes of confidence or no confidence would happen on an annual basis. So I think that was a very wise choice early in the process as we we knew that you would need some amount of data to actually make decisions of that magnitude. But at this time, we've had a pretty good start, and at least as far as anything I've heard, the crisis center manager, who's Grace Dolphy, most of you have met, is very accommodating for answering questions, coming to meetings, meeting with folks at the crisis center, giving tours. She's had multiple law enforcement agencies come over with different shifts and give tours at their convenience. And so she's done, I think, a great job at engaging the community. And I think that she intends to continue that. So if you have a group that would like to hear from her, a civic organization, any other group that wants to hear more about the center, I know that she would be happy to engage in that in any way possible. And that may be the sum total of what I know about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Curious about New Hanover numbers. Does New Hanover have its own crisis center with the 13 folks that are coming here?
Sure, yes, sir. So New Hanover County is the closest one that's had a crisis center to us. And a crisis center by statute can only be 16 beds. That's the largest it can be. So they have a 16-bed facility in New Hanover, and that is the primary location most of our folks have gone when we didn't have a crisis center. I will also add, the New Hanover County Crisis Center was not closed when ours was, and I was on the Coastal Care Board as a commissioner representative at that time, or I should say a representative of the commissioners. And their primary explanation for that is that New Hanover County provides $2.5 million to Trillium for that crisis center. So they're paying a much larger portion of the cost of that crisis center, and they don't pay any rent for the building that they're in. So that is another, portion. For us, it would be $70,000. I don't know what the value of that building is in New Hanover, but the value of our building is $70,000. So if you add that to the 2.5, because the center doesn't have to pay any rent, that's more money on top of the 2.5. So they are contributing a significant sum for that crisis center. So we have taken some when they've had overflow, but we also have sent all of ours there for years. Yes, sir.
Let me say something about that. Number one, first, I want to say thank you. You did a great job spearheading this.
Thank you.
This crisis centers, for people out in the public, you got to understand something. This is the first step in our process. And the contract isn't with Onslow County and the providers. The contract is with Trillium, okay, and Recovery International. That's who the contract is. As an oversight committee member, which consisted of the elected officials and 2 people from the hospital, we're to oversee, and we ask some certain questions. And we have to be careful with some of the questions that we ask, because as long as it doesn't violate the contract between Trillium and Recovery Innovation, which is going to allow for renegotiation, we don't want to do that. We're asking for basic information to ensure that our crisis center is going in the right direction. And obviously, by these statistics and what you heard from Ms. Slater, it is. It's beyond our expectation. I mean, we're quickly having that facility filled. And getting back to what you said, part of the MOA says, yes, it's designed for our people that are part of this task force, but it also includes the catchment area or other communities within Trillium's reign of responsibility. So if somebody comes to the crisis center, we can't say no. Okay, we just can't do that. To me, it'd be unethical if we said no to somebody. We're to triage them. If we can get them, move into another facility or another area, that's exactly what we do. And I got to say that Grace, that's the director down there, has done a fantastic job with the crisis center. This crisis center stood up on 24 July, and it is just moving forward, and they're always busy. Within that weekend, I think, or whatever it was, they were almost to full capacity, which is sad because it's indicative we have a problem. But it's good that we're addressing the problem head on and trying to provide some type of treatment, some form of direction for these individuals that need it. And so I'm very, very proud of what you all did. I'm very, very proud of the direction it's going. I sat in the last meeting for the Oversight Committee. We had some great discussions, some great points. And keep in mind that these statistics, okay, anybody knows things about statistics. This is not enough statistical data to even have a statistic, so to speak. Okay, we need at least a quarter, 3 to 4 months, so that we can see things. Because what we're looking for, at least on my perspective on the board, I'm looking for trends. I'm looking for patterns. You can't tell that within 29, 30 days. because you could have something that's low percentage here, and then 2 months later, it's tremendously high. So these are kind of skewed, but they're promising, if you understand what I'm saying. They're promising statistics, and we just need to stay on top of it. And again, I can't say enough about all the work that everybody, the partners put in, the project director, so to speak, Ms. Slater, for the hard work that they've done. And I can't say enough about Grace. She is absolutely fantastic, and this is a success for us as far as I'm concerned, and we need to keep moving forward and looking down the road. Thank you, Chairman.
Sherry, if, I noticed the trend as it is on here, it seems like alcohol is coming to the top on some of these categories for substance abuse. Let me ask you this, if a patient come in and they were alcohol and opioid together, and it could be determined that was the case, how would that be categorized? Do you know?
My understanding, sir, was that it would be the primary drug that they reported, but I would have to follow up to be sure that I had that correct. I don't know if one of you gentlemen who was also in the meeting recalls if Grace, I believe it's the primary that they report there. So if their addiction, they might also be well intoxicated, but if their addiction is the opioid problem, then that's what they would address as their primary. And those two categories are running almost neck and neck at this point. I think when we have involuntary commitments, we'll see a very different picture in some of these numbers as well.
Sherry, I've got a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
One, I remember, I think correctly, that initially it was a 2-year contract that was made with Trillium and the provider. Is that?
Yes, sir. Our MOA goes through June of 2020. And of course, our hope was that the center would be open earlier, and it wasn't. So our agreement for funding ends before their agreement with the provider. So if all of our entities chose not to continue, then Trillium is still on the hook for some amount of time because they have a contract. However, again, we won't, at the time that this agreement is up, we won't even have a full year in. So we will soon be circulating some updated MOAs for consideration by each of the entities, because we'll want to be able to keep moving forward as quickly as we can to make sure that we don't have interruptions.
My second question is, I guess the financial information you shared was a little disconcerting, to say the least. But given that what it is, I remember one of the other hopeful possibilities we talked about during the process was a 23-hour facility adjacent to the.
Yes, sir.
How does that, what you told us, impact that possibility?
So actually, Chief Yanero and I continue to work tirelessly on the 23-hour bed option, and hopefully we'll be bringing some information back to you folks before too much longer. The city and the county partnered on a study to do opioid mapping of services, and some of you were able to be present when that group was here last spring. It was in the spring, and gave us their first phase. And then we have them coming again in just a few months to talk about the second phase of that project, which the recommendation from that is the 23-hour bed facility. And I see Chief moving up, so he's ready to answer questions if they come up about that. Yes, sir?
Didn't Recovery International say they would need 6 months of data, though, first before to justify the 23-hour?
They did say that 6 months of data would be very helpful for them to justify to Trillium that they need it. I do believe that with the study that we had commissioned, we probably have the data we need to show that it's necessary. Also, the numbers that we've gotten so far exceed what Trillium expected by such a large number. I would hope that we'll have, by the time we finish the study and get the information together, they'll have pretty close to 6 months. And between the two, I think I believe, and I think the chief will agree, that we're going to be able to show a great need. We do have, we were able to do some work to the front building at the crisis center, and we have a setup that will work very well for a 23-hour facility should we get to that point. And to finish answering Councilman Thomas's question, because I realize I've not finished it, but we believe that the 23-hour facility will extend the capacity of the crisis center. While we can't have more than 16 beds, having a good number, in fact, almost everyone that's been at the center so far could have gone through that 23-hour bed facility as a triage. And anyone who stayed less than 24 hours could have been handled completely in that front section, never taken up a bed, and been transferred to an outpatient or another facility, even if there's another facility, a long-term facility that's more appropriate. I think the shortest length of stay we had was 3 hours at the crisis center. So that person easily could have been managed in a chair instead of a bed. They came in, they got, calmed down, stabilized, got their first appointment, had a conversation with a professional, and was able to move on. And if we could have done that in the front building, then that would have been another bed available. So we really believe that the 23-hour facility would greatly extend the capacity of the crisis center.
Sherry, is there any outreach to the other counties that are using the facility to see if we can get some level of funding from them?
We have not made that outreach, sir, and no one's actually asked me that, so I'm totally off the cuff in my answer. I think there's a bit of, we have a lot of small counties, smaller counties. We also have the counties that I would say are more likely to have the funding for that are counties that are already funding crisis in their communities, and we're using that as well. Like, we are still sending people to New Hanover as we speak because they have the IVC ability and we don't. So there's still some back and forth. The mental health system for us is very much regional. And so while these elected bodies determined that giving some extra funds to it to make it happen here was the right thing to do, it doesn't change the fact that we're in a regional system. And so unless we fund it at 100% and manage it completely, we're limited as to how much we can limit those types of back and forths, if you will.
How many times has it been filled to the capacity where you've actually had to turn people away? Do you have any data on that?
Yes, sir. In the 39 days that we have data for, there were 5 people turned away because they were at capacity. And of those 5, 3 were referred to other. 3 were referred to, I don't want to say it wrong, let me look. 1 declined any type of service, 2 did go to the emergency room, and 2 were referred to other mental health treatment providers.
How does Trillium evaluate the traffic flow that we have? Did they actually realize that there was such a need here?
It is hard to say because a lot of people don't access any service if they can't get it fairly close. And so a lot of people who needed crisis services either didn't access services at all or went to the emergency room with other, presenting other problems as well. So they did not feel like they saw the need that we believed was there and that I think we've shown in the numbers. One number I did fail to give you when I was speaking a few minutes ago was that in the 39 days, the crisis center has served 152 patients. And 68% of those were from Onslow, Carteret, and Craven County. So that's a significant number of people that would have had nothing or an emergency room had they not had this crisis center to come to. Of that, we also, well, I won't say of that, but we also know that we're going to see an increase when the IVC capacity is there. And we know that there will be more people turned away because we'll have some, I think between the chief and Colonel Thomas the other day, they said there were 18 involuntary commitments.
We have 5 this weekend.
So, last weekend there were 18, this weekend there were 5. There's no chance that at some point someone's not turned away. when you only have 16 beds. And that's going to be true whether it's just Onslow County, or it's 3 counties, or it's 26 counties. If we in Onslow County had 18 last weekend, 2 were getting turned away. That's not going to change. It's going to be better because we have 16 beds instead of no beds. So we have 16 more opportunities at any given time to help people than we had 6 months ago.
Question for the chief, on the IVCs, what is the maximum holding time on those people before they have to have a judicial hearing?
I think that they're supposed to do that within a certain amount. I think there's one day a week that the judge actually hears those cases. I believe it's on Friday. And most of those cases have been heard at Bryn Mawr, because Bryn Mawr also has an IVC facility that can take those folks now. So if they go through their first exam and they're IVC'd, then within that week they go and the judge listens to those cases, 1 day a week.
Mr. Lazare, I think you had some comments.
I just wanted to echo Commissioner Knapp's comments. Sherry, David, and Dr. Woodruff, thank you for all your extremely hard work in seeing this thing through. But I think one of the things that we should focus on, that what we're doing here has been unique in the state, and I think we're one of the only ones that have taken a collaborative approach to a problem in a community by the various entities coming together to create this crisis center. And it's, in terms of the oversight committee, is also unique, which I think was the very most important part of the conversation as we put this together. Because one of the biggest failures in the state has been the lack of oversight of providers. And I think you talked about it earlier. We've had other providers before, but they've basically gone by the wayside. They haven't really provided any services. So I think that that's where we have a role as the oversight committee, is to ensure that the criteria that we design together is being met, and that we reduce recidivism, and that we hold the provider accountable for what they committed to via the contract, whether it's drop-off times, or some of the various different criteria that we have within the contract. And I think that's unique in the state. And I think as a result of that, we will see a reduced recidivism rate, and we will see a facility that will actually have some impact in a community. And I think from some of the responses that we've had so far of people that have actually used the facility have had some very, very raving reviews on the professionalism, on the condition of the facility, the aftercare, and the follow-up. And again, it is early, and the data is very new, but it's accurate data. And we can certainly, as we build it, I think it will give us an opportunity to bring the 23-hour facility to an open status. And again, part of the conversation at our last meeting was, with any successes, there's challenges, and the challenges are going to be the IVCs, involuntary commitments. And again, if our law enforcement agencies have folks that they need to bring to the facility, we can't not have availability for them. So that's where our job is, to ensure that we continue to work the statistics, we continue to work on getting this 23-hour portion of it open, and the joint effort between the city and the county to conduct these studies will give us valuable data in order to be able to work with Trillium and RI, hopefully, to make this a reality. So I think, we all need to be proud of what has been done here, and I think you'll have a lot more people visiting our facility to emulate that across the state, because the problem isn't getting better as we speak. It's getting worse. So I'd like to personally commend everyone that's had an impact in making this a reality. There's always a financial aspect to it, which is never fun. But if we can save a life, then I think we've done our job. And it's not always about money. And it's our responsibility as elected leaders to address a local issue. And this is a local issue that's devastating communities, families. And it's our responsibility. So thank you.
Here, if I could, I'd like to ask Mike, he and Sherry have worked on a number of grants. While we think about the money that the city and the county and our other partners are putting in, there have also been a lot of grants that we've received. So in 30 seconds or less, Chief. No.
And I will mention, the contractor also includes them looking at our aftercare. So what happens after they get out and how we can improve that aftercare. And I think that's where a lot of the grants are coming from. We have one grant, mental health grant. We have another grant that's kind of that's been filed with the Department of Justice for a little over $600,000 that we hope to hear from, that will provide aftercare for people with opioids. The city and the county partnered and got two grants, actually, one to do a strategic plan, basically, and the other to provide some services for mental health, especially within the jail. Up until the opening of the crisis center, basically, we had two places that provided mental health care, the emergency room and the jail. And we're very hopeful that when this grant gets fully operational, that the jail will be providing mental health services and guiding those folks back into that, which I think you'll see reductions in crime because we're actually getting those folks services that need those services. The strategic plan, we talked a little bit about the strategic plan last week with Trillium about the state requirement to have a plan, including a number of the things that the city and the county have been working on to improve the services within the city and the county.
One thing I would like to stress, though, is all of the data is showing the importance of the 23-hour facility. There's no question, if you look at the data, it doesn't matter whether it's for the 9 days in July or all the days in August. This facility is going to be full. That's unfortunate, but it's the reality of our community and the country right now. So I think you're going to find that 3 months, definitely 6 months from now, Sherry and Mike and others, the members of the OCCOC, as that's the advisory committee, will be talking to both of our groups and others about the need for getting into the 23-hour facility, because with the IVCs, the number of clients is going to increase.
And our contractor, we put that in the contract to make sure that they inform both bodies about that. And they're scheduling a trip sometime in late October, early November, where they'll actually be on the site. They've been doing some remote work. It's Treatment Alternatives for Safe Communities. It's actually an old nonprofit that started during the Vietnam War to get folks off of heroin. So they're located in Chicago, and they've been doing a lot of off-site work, doing inventories of the services that are provided both here in Onslow County and the surrounding area, so that they can get an idea of what the capacity is and how we can improve that capacity. So we're going to be we're excited to see what they come up with.
Any feedback from Onslow Memorial about how the relationship is working? I know they're providing meals and medications and that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. So the contract piece, they worked out directly between the hospital and the crisis center, and as far as we know, there's not been any problem with that. In terms of the service piece, there have been a couple of folks. The crisis center is not a medical unit. And so if a patient comes in and has, for instance, a severely elevated blood pressure or has a cardiac condition already, those are high-risk medical conditions for detox. So they are being sent to the emergency department. It would be nice if they didn't have to be sent, but they don't have a crash cart at the center, and they're not a medical unit. So there's still going to be some people that have to go through the emergency department because of the medical condition on top of the substance use or mental health crisis. But they have had lots of conversations. The emergency department and the representative from the hospital that's on our oversight committee have met with Ms. Dolphy from Recovery Innovations and they've talked with her about their concerns and tried to start working through some of them as they happen, because each one's a new case, in these early days. And so they've talked through those and tried to tweak the system a little bit, if you will, to improve the outcomes for those folks. So that part is still relatively new, but I know they've had several meetings already to discuss that. So generally speaking, we know they've had, we are collecting data also on where people were diverted from. Like if you hadn't come here, where would you have gone? And there's a number in here that we're going to go, that would have gone to the emergency department. That's, it's not a very large number at this point. It's about 8 or 10, looks like 10. However, we also didn't ask for that data right away. We asked for that about halfway into August. And so they're starting to keep that as we move forward. We know that the larger diversion numbers will come in when involuntary commitments start happening, because those are the ones that are definitely being diverted from the emergency department in our community, when they go straight to the crisis center instead of the emergency department. Those are diversions that are much more tangible and easy to capture. Just like if Chief and some of his folks say, well, here's your choice, we can take you through the crisis center, or you can come on and stay at the detention center, and they choose, then we know that's an actual diversion when someone chooses treatment over jail. It's harder to do right now because we don't have that option as much. I mean, they can sort of voluntarily do that now, but they're not doing the commitment process.
Sheriff, for
Sir?
the benefit of the group, I do agree about the 24-hour stand-up facility, but doesn't it have to be approved and regulated through Trillium? I mean, it has to be, yeah, so it all have to,
Yes,
it all
sir.
still falls under the umbrella of a Trillium, so they still basically in the driver's seat as far as regulations and everything. So it's not a decision, we know we need it, but it's not a decision we can make as far as making it happen.
Yes, sir. So Trillium would do the contract as well with the provider, and they would manage that contract. Crisis services are paid. The state Medicaid system recognizes crisis services. Other providers or other insurance entities, managed care organizations don't necessarily recognize crisis as a billable service. And so it is actually, facility-based crisis is actually a Medicaid term. So that is truly a Medicaid billable unit, which is why it's a little more difficult for other entities to pay or for the provider to bill other entities, because it's not a term that they have in their dictionary, if you will, of services. So we will have to work with Trillium in the same manner. The thing that's going to be easier, should the group decide that a 23-hour facility is the way to go, is that it's not regulated through Division of Health Service regulations. So we don't have to go through that long process of...
I was going to ask that.
Yes, sir. We don't have to go through that long licensing process that was so, what's the word? Laborious and time constraining.
If we got approval today from Trillium and they said, we're going to activate that, we're going to put it in place, and we're going to get the providers for it today, how long are we looking at to get that stood up?
I think it would probably take them 60 days or so, because they'd have to hire staff and get up to speed, but it would be a very quick process by comparison. Additionally, the front building would need very, very little modification to work very well as a 23-hour facility. So we're actually set up very well to make that happen kind of quickly. The problem is that while Trillium can pay some Medicaid dollars for it, that's only for people who are Medicaid. So the rest of the money would come out of their state funds or county funds. And the state funds have been cut, as you all are aware, every year for many years. And so, there's going to be that's going to be a consideration for Trillium. And I can say that with some authority, being your representative on the Trillium Board. I know what those numbers look like, and it's going to be difficult for them to take on another service when their state funds are being cut, because the state funds would be a big part of it. And then they would look toward county dollars, which, you know, the contributions that are coming in from counties. So, you know, just if we're talking about the real world, that's going to be a consideration, is what are the communities or the partner agencies able to contribute in looking at one more service that has to be funded. So one thing that we're currently asking for is for a projected budget on that facility, so we would know what the potential would be, or have some idea, so that as we move forward, at least we know what we're talking about in terms of commitment.
I got a question, Chief. Have we found any used needles in our communities? And if they are found, what should our citizens do if they find used needles?
Typically, they call us and we'll help dispose of them. And we have found them, and we do dispose of them on a regular basis.
Any other questions regarding this topic? Comments? Next thing we're going to look at here is number 3 on our agenda, is the tax increase impacts and unexpected consequences.
First of all, I'll let you relax. This is not a discussion of sales tax and how the formula should be changed. It is really an attempt, though, for us all to realize that when you look at the issue of property taxes and sales taxes, and you look at the issues of funding government, none of us have the golden goose. There's not enough money to go around, and everything that happens does not happen in a vacuum. There are consequences to us all. The chairman was kind to call this morning and let me know that the bids came in, for example, the bids came in for 2 elementary schools, and they came in $11 million over the budget. That's an issue that the county and the school board are going to wrestle with. What I'd like to do is take just a moment, though. When you look at the sales tax distribution, we all know that there are 3 methods to do it. I will say to you, there is no right method, there is no wrong method, there is no method that benefits everybody. The way that it's currently set up, it doesn't matter what you pick, there are issues that particular method creates. Ad valorem tax is, or the ad valorem method is the current method. And as we said, none of those are perfect. There are components of the formula. And obviously, the components are basically your values and then the tax rates. When you look at the current tax rates from 18, 19, and 20, you can see that across the county, the rates vary. That's dependent upon what that particular government feels they need to tax their property owners in order to accomplish. I'd like to show you, though, what the unintended consequences, how they happen. In this particular example, you will notice the tax base, then you'll notice the rate, you'll notice the result, and then you'll notice the percent. What is the percent? The percent is how much of the sales tax you get. Now, this is not a negative comment, so please don't take it that way. A couple of years ago, the county commission was asked by the school board to raise property taxes. Why? They needed schools. We all agree with that. The county commission, in my opinion, did the right thing. They raised the taxes. Now, there are many people in the community who say, never raise my taxes, but at the same time, they want all the services. And you can't have quality police and fire, and you can't have quality schools unless somebody's willing to pay for it. You can't have beach renourishment unless somebody's willing to pay for it. And guess what? You can't have the Dick Crisis Center unless someone's willing to pay for it. In this example, I'd like for you to focus on the 54.94% of the sales tax. This example, the same entity raised their rates because they needed to. And look what happened on the percent of sales tax. It went up. And look what happened to the 2 entities that did not raise their rate. their percent of the sales tax went down. These are unintended consequences. Entity 1 raised the property taxes and received more sales tax. Entity 2 and 3 did not raise their property taxes, but lost sales tax. Nobody meant for that to happen. Everybody had good intentions, and in this examples, I'm not putting any names to it, so please, in your mind, don't put names to it. Let me show you another thing on the unintended consequences. Entities that raise their property taxes also receive more sales tax. Entities that do not raise the property taxes receive less. And guess what? If you did what your property owners want, your citizens want, and that is reduce your property taxes, look what happens to you. You could also lose sales tax money. The bottom line is the current method has a built-in incentive to raise taxes. And every time you do, there are the unintended consequences on everybody else. As we mentioned, you did the right thing. You raised taxes to help the school board. The unintended consequences was that the city lost significant revenue. That was not your intent. Moving forward, because there is no process that is fair to everybody. You know, my wife says a fair is where you buy a ticket and ride a ride. It doesn't matter how you tax people, there is someone who benefits, there's someone who does not benefit. What I would challenge us all to do in the years ahead, because I think it's important for us to work together. I think your chairman and our mayor have set the tone for constant communication, for constant working together. We need to pledge that we are going to communicate often and that we're going to remember the big picture, that it isn't just about the city of Jacksonville, it isn't just about Onslow County, it's about every entity in the county. We need to figure out the impacts, not just the benefits to us, but the impacts to all. And we need to try to create a philosophy of do no harm. For example, if the county needs to raise taxes this coming year because of the $11 million shortfall to fund the school, if you have to raise taxes, please remember the impact it has on the city and see if there's a way you can neutralize that impact. We're in this thing together because guess what? All the citizens in the city are county residents. Every person you tax, let me say it otherwise, every person we tax, you also tax. So we need to do everything we can to work together. Now, simplistically, let's talk about revenue sharing. Looking back, I can tell you this commission and this city council have done some phenomenal things together. I'd ask you to look back 8 or 9 years ago. Sharon, you may have visited the city. You weren't on the county staff at that time. But I can tell you, this is not the view that you used to get coming into Jacksonville. Do you know why that happened? Cooperation. It happened because the county commission and the city council, along with others, put in money to make something good happen for the community. Look at this one. Now, we couldn't find a picture of Paul Buchanan in the excavator tearing down one of our first buildings, but you remember that day, don't you? Yes, I do. Absolutely. But, you know, David has come to us in the past and said, look, can't the county and the city work together so when there's a county building project, that the city building inspectors don't have to take their time to do it? And we are doing that. We currently have a request, and I apologize to David, it's been sitting on my desk about 30 days, for, I believe, an expansion to animal services, and we'll be bringing that to City Council. But that's a win-win. These are examples of how we work together to create win-win situations. Obviously, the one that Sherry and Mike and others, Commissioner Knapp and also Commissioner Lazaro, Councilmember Lazaro, the Dix Crisis Center, it's a success. Why? Because we're cooperating and we're communicating on a regular basis. Great opportunity is coming up. I don't know whether you enjoy crossing the Phillips Bridge, but I'm telling you, I love to cross the Phillips Bridge. And you know why? Because you got a great Jacksonville landing right there, And looking across the water, you have a phenomenal courthouse and county complex now. We are beginning to develop a true downtown skylight. One of the opportunities is shown up here in blues and greens. The greens, that's county property. The blues are city properties. The task force that was put together several years ago has not met for many reasons, and I think it's time for us to get that task force back together, because with the phenomenal building that you have built there in the courthouse expansion, we need to decide what's the future of this waterfront. Do we sell it, have private development go there? Do we join together and build a phenomenal park? Or. But here's a great opportunity. Here's another opportunity. I did see a county employee, I won't mention who, park in front of this for about 2 hours waiting for gas the other day. This is the old Exxon station. The only reason why he was there was because I'd been sitting there for 3 hours myself waiting for the gas pump to turn on. This is no longer the Exxon station. You know what it's going to be? The new Welcome Center for the community. So a new opportunity is there for maybe TDA money from the county, TDA money from the city, or other monies from both to retrofit this building and have a great welcome center. It's not a big building. We may need to add a lot of things to it, but it's a new opportunity for us to partner. Here's another one. This is a ladder truck, and this is Sam's Furniture. You may recall that about, a year ago, Mike, something like that, we had the unfortunate fire. You may also know that over the weekend, we had a major fire down at Surf City. Fire departments from all over came. The aerial truck that the city has is $1.8 million, coming up for replacement in about 3 years. This is a truck that if any of the schools in the community catch on fire, this truck's going to be essential. If any of the multi-story buildings, including the hospital, catch on fire, this is a truck that's essential. So one of the things, City Council has certainly not authorized me to do this, and they may not. But one of the things that we may be doing is asking y'all to assist us in those 5-year payments to buy a brand-new aerial, because it benefits everybody, not just those who are inside the city, because that hospital, the schools, even your complex out in Burton Park, if it caught on fire, David would be there with his blankets beating everything out, but he'd also be calling us and saying, please come to help. The fire training facility. Y'all have done a great thing by signing a MOA, MOU, whichever it was, with the college. And we're going to be working together with city funds, county funds, and funds from the independent fire districts and from the fire tax to build this facility. At the end of the day, it really is about working together. And so the message that I would leave to both groups today is this. Remember the big picture. Remember we're in this together. And together we can accomplish some great things, just as you've seen we have accomplished. Any questions or comments you may have regarding those thoughts?
Well, I, for one, would like to see us go ahead and regenerate that whole task force concept. It worked really well with the crisis center. We had it going with the downtown redevelopment at one time. Redevelopment in downtown has not stopped, but we still need to be involved. I mean, there's been changes in the downtown, where there's a need for parking. And I think if we worked on this together, like we did before with our representatives from each body getting together and looking at that area down there, not just in downtown, but any place else, like you say, that we could be where we can make each other's delivery of service easier to our citizens. That's the whole bottom line there is, how we can benefit everybody.
And Richard, I want to thank you for the Welcome Center. I think that's really a nice idea. And I sat on the downtown revitalization. I think Price has been assigned to it. We haven't met, but I met with you before many years. That Welcome Center is something we need to jump on that right now. I mean, we have money set aside in our tourism money, and that's a project that would actually offset that boat ramp. I mean, it's going to offset that whole area there. I mean, I'm really excited about that. I mean, because it's capital improvement money we take from tourism money, and that's what I've always wanted to do, and Jack has been very supportive of that, and so has Royce and them. When you take a project that you can touch, see, and go into, is much more than us giving money away for fairs and these other things that we have going on, different festivals and whatnot, because then you see it, you touch it. I really thank you for that, Richard.
I agree with Paul on that. That Welcome Center, that location is not the edge of the city limits, but it is a gateway. And it would complement the boat ramp that the board that he was on before me, that they worked on and made that happen. And then you got the courthouse and that backdrop across the river. So I think I think a task force putting back together would be really an asset to both the county and the city.
Even if we could do something as far as the revenue sharing, maybe that's something we need to look at too, maybe through some joint effort by both bodies, or even including other municipalities. I mean, like you mentioned, it affects everybody. Has anybody got an opinion on that?
Sammy, it needs to be worked on. How do we work on it? It's going to take some brilliant minds, which we have a lot of brilliant minds sitting right here at this table, but it's one of those things that, damn if you do, damn if you don't. We got to figure something out, but I don't know how to figure it out, guys. I'm gonna be honest with you. And I'm one of the commissioners that voted for that. I'm the only one left. The other two that voted for are no longer commissioners. And I've always said, Sammy and I have had this conversation several times, we need to look at it, but we need somebody a little bit more that can figure this thing out where it's not like Richard said a while ago, it has to be a win-win. And we can't have a lose-win because it doesn't work. And right now, I don't know where to go because
And it's not easy.
if we go back to the 60-40 split, then we wind up with Topsail Beach gets nailed, and then we get Swansboro gets nailed, and then even you guys make out, Richlands makes out, but then the commission, the county loses. So there's got to be some sort of a percentage someplace. I don't know some of these accountants around here can figure that out, but we need to look at it. We really do. Honestly.
Like I said, there's no easy solution to it, but there's got to be a solution somewhere. I mean, it's going to take searching to find it, but I think by putting our heads together, and again, just not the city of Jacksonville and Onslow County, but, including, others that are stakeholders in this, to maybe come up with a solution.
And one other thing too that we need is, another thing I want to add to this that what Richard has brought up, and Mike Lazar and I have been working on this project for I don't know how long, Mike, 15 years, I guess. We need some sort of a sports complex. I don't think we can do a indoor type thing anymore. I think Mike and I have talked about this, I think it's out of our reach, but we need fields. We need some working fields, and I don't know where we put it at. You go off of Western Boulevard for it, but we need a good, when you go to Myrtle Beach, if you go to Greensboro, our soccer fields and lacrosse fields and baseball and softball fields, and William, you and I have talked about this also. I mean, it's another project that can be done with tourism money, but it's a project that we need something for our youth.
Well, I think to tie into what you're saying, what I think we need to do is, obviously we've grown as a county and we've grown as a city, and sports is a tremendous economic engine across the country, and we've had our share of successes with it, but I think we're at the point where we're stagnant and it's actually costing us money not to move forward on some of these endeavors. And I think it may be time that we do a cross-evaluation, do a joint effort of really looking at recreation and really identifying those gaps, because I think we're missing a tremendous amount of opportunity, not only in economic development through sports, but just really offering a more current state of recreation within a community that's grown quite a bit. And you're right, you and I have talked, I was heavily involved, in soccer for years and years, but we're missing the boat on economic development when it comes to sports. We're doing very well, and you guys know the numbers because you see it in your TDA numbers, and we do as well. But as part of that, because we don't have adequate current facilities, we are missing the boat on a great deal of revenues within our community that could be coming here instead of going to other places, whether it's volleyball or cheerleading or indoor activities. We're not there. And, again, it's something that we don't need to leave in a drawer. I think we need to really take the dust off of and really have some conversation jointly about it. Because I think together we can certainly make a greater impact than what we're doing as individuals right now. So,
Thank you, Mike.
I'm for it if we can use occupancy tax money. And I think the occupancy tax is going to be up because of the hotel stays. And if we can use occupancy tax to fund some of those things, I'm all for that. I do want to say about sales tax distribution, the formula though, if we start talking about the formula, ad valorem or per capita or the mixed version, I think we need all the municipalities. I think we need them at the table, because anytime you impact other people's budgets, you need those people at the table, at least know and be part of it.
Totally agree with you on
I
that.
hate to say that. I hate to say that, but, and it'd be a big group, but I don't think we need to do much with that without having those people at the table.
I don't think you can do that.
Right.
And I wished it wouldn't have been done like that to start with,
Well,
but it was, and that's possible. But, the thing about it is, it's something we do need to look at, because, like Richard's explaining to you about our citizens are being double taxed, okay? All right, and, you saw what he explained to you there, but.
Oh, yeah. I don't disagree with it at all.
I think we should have a discussion. I really think we should have a discussion. And again, include, the other municipalities, to not include.
Somebody like Topsail Beach,
Yeah.
I mean, they,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Swansboro definitely, they're going to lose a load.
Absolutely. But I think that, the future of downtown Jacksonville, has a large impact on the county, just as much so as it does the city. And I think that's one place that we can start, collaborating again. We had it going on there for a while, and then we kind of it's kind of simmered down. But I think, if that would be agreeable to some of the commissioners and council members here, to instruct our management to get this initiated again, and maybe get members of both boards involved and trying to come up with, ideas of how we can go forward with downtown.
Sure.
and one of the issues with sales tax distribution is it's an antiquated system. I mean, it's been in place forever and ever, and it doesn't work in the current world. And that's not our fault, that's up at the state level. But, again, you take a place like, and it's not just because it's Jacksonville, but Jacksonville is the economic hub of the county. This is where sales tax is being generated, and the city has invested a tremendous amount of money to build the infrastructure for these services to come here in which the sales tax revenue is generated. And we provide the calls for services, and, again, we have that impact to generate those sales tax dollars. So if the tables were flipped, I think you guys would feel the same way, that we should just get our just revenue from those services that we were able to provide. And I think that's where the inequality is. And the conversation should surely include all the other municipalities that have a stake in it, because they provide some economic development and sales tax dollars as well. But the real issue is that it's an outdated method, it doesn't work, and unfortunately, the changes that were made years ago now generated additional income for the county, and as the pressures increase for funding and providing services to a community, nobody wants to lose any money, because then you have to make it up somewhere, as we did. We had to make up $2.3 million. And, we had to impact our citizens to make up that money that we lost when, the revenue shifted. So we understand that adjustment, but at the end of the day, it's about equal sharing of revenues that are generated from the just entities. And I think that we need to have that conversation. It's not a good conversation, but it needs to be had.
It's
Well, I think, and there was some talk about it on the state legislative.
Because it's not just us, it's
Level.
across the state.
Because you have, I don't know what the numbers are, but you got half the counties that do it ad valorem, and the other half do it per capita. We are fortunate that we had the mixed blended method, but we had to include 40% in that formula somewhere. But I'm thinking down the road that the state is going to step in and they're going to say, okay, it's going to be one or the other, and it won't be up to the commissioners to decide. I think that's what's going to happen. And I don't know which way it might go, but it could go either way. But I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, and I think what you're saying a while ago was reference to what Richard was saying about tax increases. And we got a dilemma now with $11 million reference to the schools. So Jack had mentioned it to me, and I don't know where this goes, but the $18 million in the budget, in the state budget, is that for construction? Can that $18 million be used for that $11 million? Anybody got the answer to that one?
That's a David question.
Well, as a board education man out there, I just want Mr. Taylor. Oh, look, he's not talking. But I mean, if that was possible, then that puts us out of, because right now, if we build the Dixon Elementary down in Dixon, that means we got to build another school next year. We don't have the money. And then we're talking about looking at that Valorum, we got to look at that as another piece, Sammy. Now we got to juggle some. And what it comes back to is what Richard said, raising taxes again. And, I know nobody wants to hear that. I don't, but, I'm one of the guilty parties that just raised it 3 cents.
I mean, if we keep on going on the course we're going, we're not going to accomplish anything. So I
We're going to
think,
be in the hole, Sammy.
so I think we need to maybe put our collective minds together and, try to think us through a solution.
Every time we turn around, there's a new mandate that we have to,
Yes.
it gets
Well, I
passed
understand,
down
yeah.
to us that we got to figure out how to fund, so.
I do realize y'all are
It's,
faced with those
tough
sort of
one.
issues too.
Yeah, the school, building the school is really not an option for us. It's mandated constitutionally and statutorily. It's mandated that we provide space, and we just cut the ribbon on the Dixon Middle School a couple of years ago, and it's already over capacity now because they had to move the kids from the elementary school to the Dixon Middle School. So, and that's like that everywhere, and we're getting right at, Earl can vouch for this, we're getting around 300 more students a year. And every 2 years, you got 600 students, that's another elementary school. And not to mention, Northwoods Park, renovation, that's on the drawing board. And, like Commissioner Buchanan said, $11 million in the hole on this, the 2 bids that came in. And it's partly due from the damage from the hurricane that Camp Lejeune has got $3.6 billion of damage that they're trying to scuffle to get contractors to do that work. And they'll be taking up all the labor force. And then they're bringing in around 1,000 to 1,500 additional labor people to accomplish the $3.6 billion damage at Camp Lejeune. And looking at that map that David sent, it looks like everything on base is being rebuilt or redone. So, and that's a 5-year project, folks. It's not something that's going to happen in a year and it'll be gone. That's a 5-year project.
But we're being told it won't impact us, right?
That's what they said. The other piece of that too, Sammy, is Royce was there and there were several more of us who were there, that 700 more Marines are coming in the next 5 years to Marsaw, but standing up another battalion within California.
Shutting down on the West Coast.
Yeah. So that's another 700 Marines coming in within the next 5 years.
And that's just the Marines that bring in their families.
Probably
Families.
2,100
Just talking about the
people, yeah.
military. What about the rest of them?
That's another 2 schools.
Sammy, you're right. We got to work together. We got to figure something out.
I mean,
Earl, you better come up with something.
Oh.
you don't have to respond to that, Earl. Thank you.
It sounds like we've laid the groundwork for the joint task force to come together and start working, looking at some things.
Here.
I think that's something, Richard, that you and David could work on as far as how you'd want to set that up, as far as the different areas that need to be looked at. Let's start with that visitor center, that collaboration too.
I agree with that, Sammy.
Start with
That's
something simple.
that's something we can move on with pretty
Well, that's
quick.
something you can move on pretty quick.
One thing we do need to do is take that for rent sign down out from in front of it, because
Actually, Mayor, we're getting revenue by letting them keep that advertising sign up there.
as long as we're getting revenue, that's fine. I'm just getting questions as to why we've spent money to buy that, and now we're renting it out, so.
Sign in front of there, Dr. Woodruff and I wouldn't have left that there.
That's it. Thank y'all. Appreciate the discussion.
Let's move on to this was kind of tied in with the sharing the county revenues. You kind of covered that mostly, didn't you?
Yes, sir. The last thing we had was a very quick, I know the hour's late, so Anthony, if you could make this very quick. Not too much good news when it comes to highway projects, so.
That's hard for you.
I know.
With 21 projects off the table, you don't have much to talk about.
True that. Convenient, right? In all seriousness, though, it's pretty customary for us to give you an update on transportation projects every time we get together for a joint session, and we definitely wanted to continue that. But as you alluded to, the status is not good. DOT is facing some very challenging financial situations right now. Many of you, I sent this article to several weeks ago, very poignant in its contents. And then, of course, the Daily News ran another article this past weekend, kind of bringing it home, making it local to Onslow County. But essentially, they're out of money. And to just kind of put it in our context, we're all familiar with the fact that we're required to have minimum thresholds for fund balance, right? The DOT's fund balance threshold is around $300 million. Last week, the chief operating, well, it wasn't chief operating, it was the chief engineer for DOT did a presentation, and at the time he said their fund balance was $320 million. So for a $5 billion a year organization to be down to a surplus or be above board by $20 million, that's a pretty scary thing to me. Anyways, what does that mean for us? This is updated information, Amanda. I gave the Daily News the information that we had at the time, but it is an evolving situation. The main thing is that almost all of our projects are on hold. They have been suspended until further notice. I don't really know what that means, but what I think it means is they're not going to start any new projects until they have enough money. And they've got to figure out a way to do that. So the 24 road projects that have been frozen represent about $450 million worth of investment. This is where all of our high priority projects lie right now. So 111 extension, Jacksonville Parkway extension, 210 widening, Western Boulevard widening, all the highest value projects that we were able to fund are in that on hold category. There are 5 projects that we are able to move forward. The Henderson Hawk Big Beacon, I think we're all pretty familiar with that. For county commissioners who haven't been part of that discussion, it's a pedestrian improvement at Jacksonville High School. It's a partnership between the city, the school system, and DOT. They are committed, and so are we. We're going to put that in the ground, and construction's actually underway. Gum Branch widening is still moving forward, but that is not the 4-lane divided roadway. That is the turn lanes and paved shoulders. So it's a good project, but it's not ultimately the one that we're looking for. Midway Park safety enhancements, Marine and Belfork widening, of course, that needs to be done. Western and Gateway North and Gateway South as well. All of these projects are value added. But again, I'm not sure that they're the highest priority projects that we have for our area. These are the ones that we can actually afford to move forward at this time, though. One point of clarification, in the article, it did mention that 172 widening, the project that's underway in Sneads Ferry, as well as the Western and Gum Branch Road intersection widening projects, that those would be delayed. That is not the case. So only projects that, let me say that differently. Projects that are under construction retain their funding and will move forward on their current schedule. So we're not going to see any delays to the work down in 172. I know it's been complicating travel in that area for a little while now. Are there any questions? It's not a bright outlook, and I would invite feedback from the TAC members.
25853, where's that at?
Suspended.
So Anthony, you said, we know that they've been put on hold, but you don't know how they'll be unholded. Is that kind of what, I mean, are they going to go through a we don't know. Just, is it going to be reprioritized or just one day?
I don't know. I mean, so it's not, I would say it's not unusual for DOT to go through cycles like this, where the balance is high and then the balance is low, but I've never seen it this low. Just to put it into perspective, about 4 years ago, the fund balance that they had was around $2.6 billion. And now it's $320 million. So, I mean, this is as difficult, and I could go back to, I mean, anytime you're using words like this, it's not a very happy situation. I know that there have been layoffs locally. I know that there have been layoffs in Raleigh. I know that they're also looking at cutting back on their contractor force. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but I wouldn't look for any new projects to go under construction until next year, at least next year.
Anthony,
Sir.
the money that, or the reason this was suspended, is it because of all the repairs and damage that was done during the hurricane? And the reserve, a lot of the reserves are used, is that?
That's certainly part of it. That's certainly part of it. Anytime you have to outlay $300 million for something that you didn't expect, I mean, that certainly hits the coffers.
Are they waiting for federal money to come in, or have they applied for it, or where are they at in that?
Still waiting for some reimbursements from Hurricane Matthew. So, I mean, it's a slow process, and I think all of us are very familiar with that these days. That just because you've incurred the cost doesn't mean that you're going to get the reimbursement immediately. So it's a combination. There's some lawsuits, and I showed you with the headline there. There's some lawsuits that are going to probably create about $1 billion worth of liability over the next 3 years. Several $100 million worth of environmental storm and environmental issues that they have to overcome, and then just the sheer cost of business is going up substantially. I mean, if you read the Daily News article, our resident engineer is telling us that oil and steel, they both doubled in cost, and that's not always something that we can easily budget for up front. It's like the $11 million situation. Who expected that to happen? The TIP projects are the same way.
What's troubling to me is they haven't got their federal emergency management money, and we were real lucky with this last hurricane that we didn't have a lot of damage. And it's troubling that if they don't get this money before next year, when we get into next year's hurricane season again. Hopefully this year we're out of that, but you don't never know.
One thing to keep in mind, while we fared pretty well with Dorian locally, you know, DOT still had some major challenges out there on the barrier islands that they're having to contend with. So, I mean, any storm that hits North Carolina, they have to deal with, and they're just becoming more frequent and more severe, so.
Anthony, is the budget deadlock in Raleigh having any impact on this?
My understanding is no, that it's not. These are all funds that are kind of, I don't know the best way to describe it. They're funds that aren't necessarily directly connected to the operating budget, the state operating budget. So they handle the appropriations of this money completely separately.
The real elephant in the room is these lawsuits. Mr. Thomas asked a question, when do we expect these to be unfrozen? The answer is, like Anthony said, who knows how much the taking issue that the judge has ruled is going to cost the DOT and the state. I mean, the estimate right now is $1 billion. It could be more.
We are highly confident that it's going to be over $1 billion.
Yeah.
They've settled, I think, 30 lawsuits, and it's over $320 million in just the first wave.
One of the fortunate things for at least our area, I guess it's fortunate for the DOT, is about 8 years ago, Representative Cleveland and I believe Senator Brown brought to the city council's attention that some of the land that was in the reserve right-of-way status inside the city was just having major impacts on development. And the mayor and council voted to take it off, and we haven't had those reserve corridors in the city now for 8 or 9 years. But when you look at some of the major corridors that have been reserved, which the courts, I think, correctly ruled was a taking without compensation, that's where the real number is going to continue to grow until every one of those suits is settled.
The law went into effect in 1987, and it was just reversed in 2016. So you can think of basically 30 years worth of accrual of these various liabilities. And the city council demonstrated excellent judgment in 2008 when they decided not to approve a corridor protection map for one particular area. Because in Mr. Lazara, Mayor, I mean, I'm sure, if I recall, you were there to help make that decision, and you made that decision for the same reason that the Supreme Court basically overturned the law.
I'd like to, interject or update the board on one issue. So I sit for the county on the Down East RPO, and we were informed that coming out of last week, basically that organization has essentially lost its professional staff. And so that organization moving forward, no matter how it moves forward, is going to have a pretty significant transition that's going to affect its productivity. I know that the idea has been floated in the past, and I think it would certainly be time for the portions of our county that fall under the Down East RPO, which would be Swansboro, Richlands, and Holly Ridge, and those outer areas. I really do think it would make sense, especially now, looking at that organization's sort of bleak immediate future, to really think about expanding the Jacksonville MPO to cover all of Onslow County so that we can have one organization strategizing our way forward on these transportation issues.
And I said as the chairman some years ago, that was one of our goals, is to hope that we can work in that direction, because I think there's a tremendous amount of benefit in doing that. And I think that's a conversation that definitely should be had, and particularly under this opportunity.
Anthony's been working on that, pretty hard.
And the key benefit that I tell everyone when we go talk to them about the MPO and you know, why they should consider joining is local decision-making. So it's very challenging for somebody from, say, Holly Ridge or from Richlands to understand why decisions for their transportation system are being made in New Bern.
Right.
When we have an organization here in Jacksonville that does the same thing, probably at a higher level. So as you recall, last time we were together, we talked about the potential, and this is an excellent segue, thank you. We talked about the potential for expanding the boundary to all of Onslow County. I didn't hear any reluctance. There seemed to be a lot of support. And so we've been talking to the other municipalities about that opportunity. And at this point, if you take a look at the screen, we've already got 3 municipalities scheduled to adopt resolutions of support for the boundary expansion. 2 still remain, but the conversations have all been very, very positive. Once we're able to check mark on all 5, then of course we'd want to come back to the county commissioners and get a resolution of support there so that we can kind of wrap up that demonstration and start working with Federal Highway and DOT to do the actual paperwork to expand the boundary.
Dr. Woodworth, did this suspension have anything to do with the Powell bill money?
No, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay. Brings us to, is there any comments from council?
Just thank you for the opportunity to have a joint session. I think it's always very valuable for not only us, but for the citizens to know that we work together on their behalf. So thank you.
we work together and try to save money together and communicate. I think communication is key. Right hand knows what the left hand is doing, and I think the mayor already said it, and some other folks said it. People that live in these cities and municipalities are county citizens too. Where you live in the city or not, you still pay county taxes. So we have to try to make the best of our money that we have available to us. It's been very positive, I think this meeting has, and hopefully we can have more and open up and keep lines of communications open, so we're all on the same page. Any other commissioners have anything?
I'd like to say thank you to both of you and Sammy and both the managers, both the clerks for putting this all together. It took all of them and the staff. I want to thank everybody.
I'd like to,
Anybody? No? Good.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the Onslow County Board of Commissioners.
Second.
A second, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're going to ask for a motion to adjourn. I'm not worried about us having a no tonight since Councilman Ward is not here, but I'll go ahead and entertain the motion.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. As far as the city council is concerned, we're going to take a brief pause here for a second or two, then we're going to reconvene as a special meeting to go into a closed session. So